about it, Biff will say, "You'll get no mercy from me. You're going to get no compassion from me." And then, of course, immediately, again, notice Willie Loman. "I don't know what that is. I don't know. What is that?" Biff goes, "You know exactly what this is. You're the one that put it in the basement." Willie Loman cannot admit the truth. Is this play at the conflict level really that simple? Character versus self. The inability to admit the truth about yourself and the truth about your failings and your faults. Of course, we haven't even mentioned the fact that the title of the play is not Death of a Plumber or Death of an Electrician, but Death of a Salesman. The play is an economic treatise, isn't it? What happens when an individual has given his whole life to trying to make a living, to capture the Fitzgerald understanding in Great Gatsby of the American dream, and he never gets there. And of course, on the penultimate day that we are studying in this play, he is fired. He is fired by the little weasel he helped name. Right? Charlie will, of course, say, "What is that? Nobody cares about the fact you helped name the guy. What difference does that make?" Notice in the end for Willie, he says to Charlie, "I wanted to be liked." It's so interesting that he says, "I wanted to be liked." And Charlie says, "Really? What's with you and being liked? Who cares? It doesn't really matter." Of course, it echoes again the need Willie has to be liked when he says, "Biff, he likes me." Again, maybe the most pathetic line of the whole play. It tells you that Willie has spent his entire life after the Boston experience coming to terms with the fact that he's not liked.
What about Happy when he wants to be like his father?
Isn't that fascinating? "Dad, I'm working out," or "Dad, I'm going to get married." And the second son is, "Yeah, right, treated. Yeah, right, yeah, nice job. Thanks for coming out." Completely disregarded. Now, there's a lot of viewers of this play who have grown up in families with brothers or sisters and had to come to terms with the fact that in some families, there in fact is favorites that are played. That situation is a very real one. Some students will report it's much harder to be the golden child. It's so hard to be the golden child, the one that the parents adore, if you will, the Biff character. Others will report, "You got no idea. The second, the happy child, oh, that's the worst because you're always living in the shadow. No matter what you're going to do, it doesn't matter." Notice at the very end of the play in the graveside scene, Biff is ready to leave and in fact invites Happy to come away with him, and Happy says, "No, I'm going to stay in the city and I'm going to beat this racket. I'm going to prove that Willie Loman did not die in vain." Weird. He's still trying to gain his father's approval, even though his father is now gone. You have the sense Happy's going to end up just like his daddy in the end. A broken man because, what is it Biff said about his dad? He had all the wrong dreams. He had all the wrong dreams. Which is interesting because there is one reading of this play that says the only dream that Willie Loman ever had was that Biff would take over the house and raise a family in it. Remember when he says that? In other words, Willie just wanted to see his boy successful. That's all he wanted. And for Biff, he saw Willie as having all the wrong dreams. Well, what is the climax of this play for you? Because you know in the title it's called Death of Salesman. So you know that in the end of the play, Willie Loman is going to die. There can't be anything shocking about that unless you've completely ignored the title of the play, right? You are told when you walk into the theater or the film to sit down and watch the movie, you know what's going to happen. You're going to sit for 2.5 hours to watch what you know is coming. Not unlike the play Othello. You know that in the end, Iago's going to jack Othello. He says as much in the beginning of the play, and sure enough, he does it. But Death of Salesman? What is the primary climax of the play?
Boston.
It does seem that often that bedroom scene, that hotel scene, is the scene. Because why? What is it that brings to fruition so much of the conflicts? Clearly, it kind of explains what's going on between Biff and his daddy. Yeah, that inability to resolve that central moment of dishonor, dishonesty, infidelity, made potent by, notice the brilliant symbolism of the stockings. Biff will say to his daddy, "You gave her mama stockings." To which, notice, Willie will say, "I gave you an order. Pick up my bags, get my suits." And it's at that moment. It's like a twig that just and snaps, which of course tells you that Biff was already psychically very fragile. It does beg the question, one talked often about, how realistic is this decline of the character of Biff for a single moment of infidelity? There have been students that say, "No way, are you kidding me? Come on." I mean, he catches his dad messing around. He cannot be totally shocked by this, but even if he is totally shocked by this, come on, he's not going to flush his whole life over one moment. There are other readers of this play and viewers of this play that say, no, this is what is really dangerous about families. You are raised looking at people for so long, having a certain understanding about them in your mind's eye, that when finally, if ever, it comes to full light that they have been completely dishonest in one way or another, it calls into question everything that you think not only about them, but about your own life in relationship to them. All of Biff's dreams, Barnard says, goes away when he returns from Boston. Of course, that scene does come right at the end, followed, of course, by the penultimate family scene, where, notice, all of the conversations take place in the kitchen, where we make up our food, and, of course, we're going to have it out once and for all. Notice the Malkovich character will even roll up his sleeves. Isn't it brilliant? All of the little subtle ways that we're going to get to the bottom of this. But it does beg a really interesting question at the end of the play, and that is this. Do you think they have gotten to the bottom of it? Linda Lohman will say, we paid off the house and we were free and clear. Free and clear. Is anybody free at the end of the play? Willie Lohman is now dead. How can he continue to lay such power on the psyche of his family members? But it appears maybe Biff is on his way to try to get away. It does beg a question, though. Is Biff the edible character in our play? That is to say, he will never get away. He is cursed by the gods, or destiny, or fate. Or rather, are we inclined to say, no, Biff is going to learn how to break away. It's going to be Happy who's probably going to be the one who will never break away.
I feel bad for all of them. They all could be like the protagonists.
The patheticness, the pathos that Aristotle spoke of in Poetics. It's depending on the ways you look. I've had students who view Willie Lohman without any pathos, at least initially.
Yeah.
They see him as just a man who has made his own terrible choices, and then he refuses to accept those choices. How can you pity a person like that? And yet at the same time, Linda Lohman forces that view, right? And the person who holds that view. Linda Lohman says, yeah, but you're missing the other side of Willie. He did everything for his boys. It was all about his boys, and he wanted good for them. And because that's the case, there's clearly something inside of Willie that's good. It became corrupted. What corrupted it? Well, the economic view, of course, is the system. The system ruined him in some way. And then there's Eugene O'Neill's desperate attempt to paint what life was like for himself in his younger years. To live in a truly dysfunctional family. A family in Long Day's Journey into Night that is, of course, character-driven. Some would argue even more character-driven than Death of Salesman. Some would argue that the mother is the most remarkable character. She, of course, will play off all kinds of stereotypes. She is, of course, an addict. She is an addict, though, who was made an addict, not of her choosing. It's not like she chose to become a morphine addict in the same way that Oedipus didn't choose to kill his dad and marry his mom, at least not consciously. Of course, it is the birth of a child which leads ultimately to the prescription of the morphine, which leads ultimately to the addiction. But mom is more complicated than simply a straight-up addict. She has been cured. But now she's going to have what we today, of course, in therapy terms and therapeutic terms, call that relapse, She's coming back into, oh no. The other three of the family know it's coming. They can tell. They can see it. They can feel it. They know it. It's inevitable. Notice how so many of these plays, the inevitability puts the audience in the most uncomfortable of positions, right? One of my students once saying, who watched Long Day's Journey tonight, you just want to scream at them on stage, knock it off! And then all of a sudden you realize, what is the antecedent to the pronoun it? What is it that has to be knocked off? Because it isn't so simple. Knock it off. Knock what off? Are you going to make a morphine addict unaddicted? No, doesn't work that way. Are you going to somehow make these two brothers, these two sons, somehow have a different view of life than the somewhat dark and pessimistic view that they have by virtue of being raised in an artist's family around actors? No. See, we know, not so easy. You can't undo the complications that are foundational to this play. You can't do it. It's not so easy to do it. Characterizations. Which character do you most identify with? Of course, this will all depend, won't it? Many have said a lot depends on who you are. Right? So, for example, if you're a mom, you have a tendency to kind of identify with the mother of this play. If you're a son or a daughter, you have a tendency to identify with the two kids of the play. And of course, if you're at all interested in the male or the masculine figure, well, that father is a very complicated man, isn't he? He wants to keep his family together, but he doesn't have the skill sets to do it. He has made choices in his early life that he cannot undo. And notice how much of it comes back to money. He is a man of some means, but he's also kind of miserly. He doesn't want to spend his money. Of course, the conflicts of this play are really, really complicated, aren't they? In many ways, they tear your heart out because you cannot help but feel for the mother of the play. What is the central conflict of Long Day's Journey into Night, do you think? Is it a character versus self? Mother knows what's happening. She knows it's going to happen again. It's as if she sees the rock rolling down the hill at her. The rock that she, like Sisyphus, has pushed to the top and thought finally she was over it. The addiction was done with. And then, brought on maybe by the worry about her son's consumption, she's aware she's probably going to lose one of her boys. Maybe it's the stress of that. She says she's so alone. She's completely alone. And here, of course, we wonder, if Jacusta could have a voice, what would she have said? Or if Linda could have spoken more, Linda Lohman, what would she say? Or if Desdemona could talk just a little bit more, or dare we say it from Hamlet's play, from Shakespeare's Hamlet, Ophelia, what would they all say? Well, Mom says it in this play. I'm just so lonely. I've got people around me, but I've got no one who I can really confide in. She is completely alone. For her, maybe then, the central conflict is simply coming to terms with the fact there is no exit. It will be a long day's journey into night, and there will be no coming back. Notice, like Willie Loman, she lives in the past, trying to somehow restructure the past in such a way that she can figure stuff out. Somehow I can make it all work out. Of course, there are the issues about her own choosing, not unlike several of the female characters we've spoken about tonight. Not unlike Desdemona, she's kind of gone against the wills of her father to marry. She married a man in the theater and all the things that that means. She tries to say what a good guy he was, and yet in the end, he's not a very good guy. He's a guy who spends more time in bars than he has spent either with her or raising his sons. Notice the adversarial conflicts in both of these plays between father and son, or sons, we could say. Notice how in Long Day's Journey into Night, the symbolism comes down to things like checking to see if the alcohol level is the right one or water has been added. Or, for example, whether the lights are turned on or not. These are all symbolic of the conflict that we will see between father and son. Now, of course, what's the most ancient example of conflict between father and son? Oedipus Rex. Of course, Freud would have much to say about this play in regards to the Oedipal complex and the idea that a son inevitably has tendencies to want to kill his own father, to somehow emasculate his own father so that he can become the man. He can become the one who takes care of all the business, obviously, for Freud, including mom and all of that. So you've got this interesting kind of sexual tension at play in Long Day's Journey into Night that you do not have at play as much, for example, in Death of Salesman. Eugene O'Neill is opening up all kinds of interesting classical cans of worms here, right? What about the climax of the play? It is Long Day's Journey into Night. It is, many viewers will say, the most painfully boring play over and over. We have the same events kind of reset, then we'll go away, and then we come back, looping, we call it, right? Back again and again. Is there a climax in this play? Is there a moment in this play where all of the conflicts come to any kind of resolution at all? Well, scholars have differed. One group of scholars will point out that this play requires that you get all the way to the dirty, bloody end, when the lights go down on stage gradually, and it is in fact night. It is darkness. And the realization is that there is no climax other than relief. In other words, the audience can finally say, whew, to quote T.S. Eliot's Wasteland, well, that's done, and I'm glad it's over. In other words, the only relief that can ever come is that the audience finally gets to get up and walk out of the theater and go, my goodness, oh, to live in that kind of hell. Of course, it's funny, because the one thing that's really desperately terrible about being an addict is that you don't know you're an addict. You can't admit it. I can stop anytime I want to. Notice how many times mom will say, I don't know what you're talking about. What are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about. Right? Which leads one to accept the fact that maybe there's more to identify with in this play than lots of viewers want to admit. Family in this play is at its core dysfunctional because of why. What is the root cause of the dysfunctionalism here? Now, see, in Death of Salesman, it's fairly easy to say, although maybe not completely believable, that it's this event in Boston and the infidelity that's discovered. Yes? What is at the root of the conflict and the dysfunctionalism in this family?
Addiction?
Yeah, we could argue that it is addiction, right? Although some scholars have pointed out that not so much addiction, let's call it illness, sickness, of any number of kinds. Notice that, of course, there is the illness that resulted after the birth of a child, which led to the prescription of the morphine. There is the illness now of that same child who is dying of tuberculosis consumption, right? There is the dying and the illness of dreams lost by professional actors who now no longer are potentially anything close to what they once were. So there's this like spiraling downward of this impounding illness after illness, psychic, physical illness. Some might even look at it as sexual illness. The inability for these two guys to love women and see them in genuine ways. They kind of like to be able to have some kind of social or sexual exchange with a prostitute so they can just clean their hands and walk away. Which is interesting because if you study the ways that in Death of Salesman, the two brothers view women, notice as well, they don't have very healthy views of women. Some have said that both Biff and Hat kind of look at women the way probably Willie Loman looks at women. He tries to control Linda, telling her what she can and can't say or do. And the sons adopt in many ways, maybe, the views towards women of the father. Is there any escape in this play, Long Day's Journey into Night? Some have said, no. All this play does is just show us that this is the tragedy of certain dysfunctional families. Others have pointed out, though, you're missing something profound if you say that, because Eugene O'Neill is one of the characters kind of in the play. This is an autobiographic play in large measure. You could argue Eugene O'Neill, the brilliant young artist, is trying to find a way to escape the very family he grew up in. And the way he escapes it is to describe it, to portray it, which is a really brilliant way to think about this play. The Long Day's Journey into Night is actually Eugene O'Neill's escaping from his own upbringing. In other words, let me open the door on the hell that was my upbringing, and yet I'm trying to somehow get beyond it. I'm trying to understand it in some way. Notice, in Long Day's Journey into Night, there are no deaths. And yet, in some ways, this play seems more tragic than Death of Salesman. Well, there you go. An introduction to 6 plays that we've worked with in regards to plot, narrative, structure, especially concentrating on issues of characterization, conflict, and climax. We could, of course, ask for simple themes that would somehow unite all of them together. Obviously, we could look at these texts as all from a psychological perspective, the individual, or a sociological perspective, the group, a political perspective. We could, of course, take a look at an economic perspective as well, a historical perspective. How do these plays, how are they viewed differently in different epochs of time? So, for example, a play of 1950s will be a different play in 2014. Maybe understood entirely different, right? There's maybe structures in place now that are not available or even suggested or gestured towards in any of these other kinds of plays. No place for Desdemona maybe to go in Othello, but today there's maybe a shelter or some place where she can go and get some help, some way to try and work it out, right? We've got maybe better systems in play now to try and help when old people are asked to leave their job, where, for example, there can be a process of kind of working through to try and help. You see what I'm saying? There are some who would argue as well we've grown a bit more cynical, and that's why viewers today can't believe that a son could get that upset about his father's infidelity, which does make for very interesting discussion points as well. Thank you for your attention, and there you go, an introduction to our plays.